Hey guys, it's Izzy here, and today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up, showing y'all all the books that I read this month and the books that I'm currently reading. Let's get into it. If you guys would like to know the description of any of these books, be sure to check out my TBR video, which I did in the first week of February, because in this video I'm just going to be telling you my thoughts on these books. The first book that I finished in February was a graphic novel, and that is Batman the Dark Knight Volume 1 Night Terrors. I don't give star ratings to graphic novels because I just feel like I can't give the same that I would give to an actual prose novel. But I really liked how this book depicted fear, but my one complaint is I feel like in most graphic novels, not just this one, women are way over-sexualized. In this one, there is a villain, and she's literally running through the jungle in lingerie. Like, that makes no sense, so I don't know why they couldn't give her a normal superhero outfit, because that's just, I know we're supposed to suspend our belief reading stuff like this, but still, I think it was really unnecessary, and it's something that I've noticed going to Comic Cons and seeing the artwork the artists do, and just in things like this. Women are way overly sexualized, and it really bugs me. But overall, this was a alright reading experience, and I am going to be giving this away as a gift to somebody, so I'm not going to continue this series, but other people might enjoy it. Next, we have a young adult thriller, and this is Follow Me Back by A.V. Geiger, and this is, like, I don't know if this story was originally on Wattpad or if she has written other stories on Wattpad. It just says aka Wattpad sensation Adam _ and _ Jane, so I don't know if this specifically came from Wattpad. So let's talk about the characters first. It was a great feeling to read about a character who struggles from the same mental illness that I do, and that is why representation is so important, and I think the author did a great job at showcasing agoraphobia and what it does to people. I really didn't like Eric as a character. He was our pop star in this novel. I don't know if that was intended or not, and I felt like the majority of these characters were toxic, other than Tessa and her therapist. So I don't know, maybe that was intended or not. But again, I really love the representation in this, because it even helped me to being like, okay, this character can conquer this, I can conquer this, and leading to me doing more exposure therapy and things like that. So the atmosphere played little or no part into this story. I don't really have anything to say about it because it was just not there. It takes place in Midland, Texas, and then like Los Angeles on the other end, and so we get names of places and just maybe what the weather may be like, but it didn't play a huge part in this story. The writing was typical and what I expected for a young adult novel, but the dialogue was so this is just not how teenagers talk. You can tell that the writer is probably middle-aged, and there's nothing wrong with that, but is no, like, nobody is out here calling Justin Bieber a sweetie pie or things like that. Like, teenagers don't talk like that. The two main characters in here are 18. Yeah, as someone who was 18 5 years ago, it's this is that how they talk. So the plot was very unique, and I think if you've ever partaken in fan culture, then you really will enjoy this story. It really shows what fan culture does to the mental health of a person, whether it be the fan projecting their feelings onto the public figure, or just how a public figure deals with fame. I think both of those are very interesting topics that should be brought forward and talked about more. We see a lot of stalker cases of people stalking celebrities, or maybe celebrities is not being kind to their fans, because in my opinion it's the fans that got you to that level, so you should always be kind and thankful for your fans. But yes, there should be boundaries, and this can go for influencers, actual like actors, musicians and all that, politicians. There needs to be boundaries, and I do think this book was an interesting deep dive at what fan culture can do to a person, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I will be unhauling this book and not continuing the series, but I did enjoy my time reading it. but I think somebody else can probably enjoy it more than I did. In February, I really focused on my mood reading being romance novels, since we did have Valentine's Day this month. So here I have Meet You in the Middle by Devin Daniels. This book was not popular on Goodreads, but I gave it a 4-star. I really liked it, and at the time it had been my favorite book that I had read the month, but that changed. So this is the first romance book that I read where I actually liked the characters. That's really surprising. There were times where I wish they would have spoken up in certain situations or reacted differently, but I didn't write the book, so I can't really complain about that. I love the Washington setting, but I wish we would have got out of the office more and just exploring the city. I think they went to K Street once to a bar, but that was like all. And they went to like the National Mall. They were like running to the Lincoln Memorial or whatever. But I wish there would have been more of DC showcased in this novel. The writing lagged or slagged, I don't know which word to use, in the middle. So in the middle it kind of was slow, but it did make up, the other elements of the novel made up for that. The plot was what I wanted to read at the moment. There were politics involved with the romance, and I just think this is a very interesting take on dating now, because I feel like politics plays such a more a bigger role in our lives now than they ever have before. So it's like, can a Republican date a Democrat? Can a Democrat date a Republican? Can that relationship be successful? I have a lot of thoughts on it. Thinking, and yeah, just a lot of thoughts on it. And I think probably if you have dated in the Washington dating scene, then you will find this book very relatable from things that I've read and whatnot of how dating is in Washington. So definitely I think you should pick this up if you live in Washington. Next I read a young adult fantasy novel, and that is Night Spinner by Addie Thorley. So this is a book I got in a subscription box, so this isn't one that I would naturally pick up on my own. The characters in this could have come out of any other young adult fantasy novel. They were one-dimensional and weren't anything new to the genre. The world building would have been a whole lot better if there was a map, but I am a visual person, so that might just be me. But we were just getting names of locations and maybe what the ecosystems at those locations were like, but we didn't actually learn about them really. There was a lot of traveling in this novel, and I think if we had that map, then it would have been really helpful to just understand it more. The writing was the highlight of this novel. It was descriptive but would never bog down the reader. And if this writer ever writes an adult novel, then I probably will pick it up. I do have another book that is a historical fiction book by this author on my TBR, so I am more willing to give that a try than fantasy, since you already have an established world. So the plot didn't intrigue me, and it was just, I just didn't connect with it. Until the very end, I was just like, the ending, I was very angry about the ending, so that makes me not want to pick up the next book. So this will be a book that I unhaul. Then I read a new release romance that came out last month, and that is The Roughest Giraffe by Emily Whiberly and Austin Sigmund Brooke. So this is their first adult novel. They've written some YA romance and contemporary novels, so this was their first dive into the adult genre. So with the characters, I only really felt chemistry during a flashback scene that was their first ever meeting, and being a romance novel, you should be able to feel chemistry throughout the whole story, but that just didn't happen for me in this one. There was tension between them, but I just don't see this being a lasting relationship, but who knows? I think this is a standalone. I've heard nothing if it will be more, and the epilogue gave us some insight on it, but I think it was kind of left up in the air. So I did love the Key Largo setting. I have been wanting to read more books set in Florida because it is one of my favorite places, and this one took the cake for that. They did a good job showing off Key Largo. The writing was a bit all over the place. That may be the fact that there were two authors, but I don't know what their setup was for that. If one author wrote one chapter, then the other author wrote the next, I'm not exactly sure, but I felt like the chapters didn't close nicely, and then we'd be at like the next day in the next chapter, so there wasn't real closure on the chapters for me. I like the plot being about a writing duo. As a writer myself, I just found it really interesting to read about other writers, but I do think this book glorified cheating in a way. Because when they would show the other partners of the characters, it'd be there was no information at all, or they would be like, this person is the worst person ever, there is no positive qualities of them. So I'm like, then why were you in a relationship with them? I do think cheating is glorified in this, so if you're someone who does not like cheating, do not read this. Like, obviously nobody likes cheating, but if you don't like reading cheating, I would not recommend this book. But I gave this a 3.5 stars, and again, I will probably be unhauling it. I have a historical romance now, and that is These Old Shades by Georgette Heyer. Characters were alright, and I had no problem with them, but I felt like the side characters were not developed enough. They were all interchangeable with one another. But the main two were very reminiscent of Jane Eyre. I am very curious if Georgette Heyer was inspired by Jane Eyre, because that is what I just kept comparing this book to throughout my time reading it. The atmosphere was one of the strong points in this novel. It was very well researched, and this is a time period that I really love and want to read more of, so I'm so glad that this was a well-researched novel for that 1700s time period. The writing is where this story falls in ranking. I felt like with the dialogue, it was hard to tell who was speaking. Like it would just be the dialogue and nothing after that. So I had a hard time understanding who was saying what, and especially with dual side characters, I'm like, okay, which one is saying this? What is happening? And then there's also a bit of head jumping. And then the first 10% of this book, I was pretty confused. Then the middle, I was fine. And then like the last quarter lagged a lot. It dragged on, but overall, it was fine. Plot is the other strong point here. I really enjoyed it. It was predictable, but it didn't hinder my reading experience at all. The romance in this, I think, can be a bit debatable. It was very one-sided, and I feel like there were several red flags here. So, I don't know, but we have to remember the time period that this was published in. So I do plan on continuing this series. I think the next book is about the characters in this, their children, and this is a time period that I want to know more about and all of that, just researching it more. So I am definitely down for reading the next book, and I will not be unhauling this. And I think I give this a 4-star. I don't have it in my notes on here, but you can check Goodreads. I think I gave it a 4-star. Now we have a very popular book, and that is The Deal by Elle Kennedy. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I was so worried going in that it would be overhyped. It was on the book talk table. It was like Spicy TikTok Books. It was the name of the table. So I was like, oh, who knows? But it lives up to the hype. It does. So the characters in this are some of the most realistic that I have read in a romance novel. We have Hannah, who is going through the trauma of she was raped prior to the novel taking place, and she's going through that trauma of finding herself again and being okay with having sex again. Then we have Garrett, who is the captain of the college's hockey team, and he wants to be no more than just being the cool hockey captain guy. Like, just being known for hockey, he wants people to realize there is more to him as a person. I really enjoyed the college setting because that meant these characters were close in age with me. I'm a year older than them, but most romances, these characters are in their late 20s or their 30s, and I can't really relate to that. So reading with younger characters was very relatable. So the dialogue did annoy me at times, but that is how people talk. It is how guys talk. So there is locker room talk and all in here, so do be aware of that. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, this book was sexist at times. That is realistic though. Guys do talk like that, even though I hate it, but it is realistic. So that is what I had to keep telling myself. I had to be like, men do really talk like this, especially like 20-year-old men. They talk like this. So just be aware of that going in. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I'm glad it lived up to the hype, and I do have the next book on ebook. But I do know the second book isn't that good, but the third book is good, but still I'm intrigued. I'm going to read it. And this was my favorite book this month. So next we have the books that I am currently reading. So I'm currently reading Medici Ascendancy by Matteo Struzzo, and it is translated from the Italian, but I don't remember the name of the translator, but you can definitely see that on Goodreads or Amazon, wherever you would like to look up this book. So the characters, this is the thing that is kind of funny. So it is called Medici is the name of the series, the Medici Chronicles. But I think those characters are so dry in this, and that the side characters are the ones stealing the show. My favorite characters are Sorts, who is a Swiss mercenary, and Laura Rizzi, who is a apothecary, perfumer kind of person. They are working as assassins for the Albizzi family, and then later the Visconti, is that right? I may have that wrong. They're assassins, and I am really enjoying their storyline. But yeah, the Medici characters are kind of dual in this, which is kind of shocking as the series is about them. So this is very immersive though, and I can definitely see the scene that the writer is writing. And it's very, I don't know what word to use to describe it, but your senses are really at play, especially nose and sight. I think the Strudel does a great job at showcasing that. With the writing, this is easy to read. I know some people are scared to go into translated works, feeling like it will be very difficult to comprehend, but in this I don't think that is an issue at all. But one thing is that I think the sex scenes are very awkwardly written. As this is a historical fiction, that's not a huge problem. Like in romance that would be different, but in historical fiction the sex scenes just pop up every now and again, and they're not like, you know, the romance. But I think they're awkwardly written, just the terms that are being used, but I do think that could fall on this being translated. That would be really awkward to translate sex scenes, but yeah, the scenes are kind of awkward. And then the writing I feel like is a bit choppy, and if you don't know anything about the Medici going into this, you probably won't get anything from this, so I definitely recommend researching the Medici and the Renaissance time period. I would highly recommend watching the Netflix show Medici Masters of Florence before reading this book, and just that one because the other books are going to take place with other seasons of the show. So just the first season of the show, I do think that will give you enough background knowledge going into this book so you will be able to enjoy it. And then I am reading The Siren of Sussex by Mimi Matthews. This is a historical romance, but I don't really think it should be classified as a historical romance. I think it should just be plain historical fiction in all honesty, but it is labeled as a romance. I can't do anything about that, but going in, I would expect more of a historical fiction than romance. But the characters in this are very interesting, and I feel like they are very well developed. We have Evelyn, who is coming from a small town in Sussex, going to London to make her debut into society. She has a lot of weight on her shoulders because she has 3 younger sisters, and if she gets a good match, then they'll likely get a good match and have good lives. Then we have Ahmad, who is part Indian, part English, and he was born in India. His mother passed away, so he went to go live with his aunt and his younger cousin. The aunt dies of sickness, and she was in a relationship with a British man, so the British man takes his daughter and her cousin back to London. He dies shortly thereafter, so Ahmad has to take care of his younger cousin, so that both characters are kind of in that role of they are taking care of their younger female relatives, and I just feel like they're very well developed for a romance. The atmosphere, I do think this is a well-researched for Victorian times. It's just so interesting for me to think about, this is in the 1860s, think of 100 years later what's happening in London with the fashion and whatnot, because fashion plays a huge part in this story. So I think just comparing the times of how they are alike and how they are different, the book doesn't do anything about that, but in my mind, I'm just liking doing that. The writing is the best writing that I have read in a romance. It's really good. Plot, I am bored with it. I think this book is a good idea, but actually on page I am skimming, which is never good. So I'm just bored with it overall, and then the chapters are long and that adds to it dragging. I know I've complained a lot about books dragging, but it happens. And yeah, so I am enjoying this book. I think it's going to be like a 3.5 or 3.75. And I might pick up the next book. It really just depends. I don't know. The next book comes out in October. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. Bye!